Very good. Okay, as I say, I'm Jim Ferrero, and if you have not already done this, please write down this phone number. You can write it right in your handbook. Andre tells me everyone has a handbook. If you don't have a handbook, though, by all means, speak up and tell us. Handbook is very important. Also, you should have a copy of the application form, the N400. And if you don't have that, let me know. So, as a matter of fact, give me a thumbs up if you have both the handbook and the application. Anybody? Does anybody have the handbook and the application? The handbook says intercambio on the front, has a Statue of Liberty. Do you have a copy of that? Yes or no?
I didn't have yet.
Okay, and that's
Sorry,
Darcy
who
Darcy
talked?
Gomez.
Yeah, it's me. You didn't receive the handbook? No yet. Okay, I'm going to check what happened with that.
All right. And Resmily, do you have a copy of the handbook? Yes, or give me a thumbs up. Just nod your head. Let me know you're there.
Yes.
You have a handbook, okay? Very good. And I'm trying to remember people's names. It helps a lot if you put your name at the bottom of the screen. But um, and Gloria, do you have a copy of the handbook? Yes or no? Gloria, do you have a copy of the handbook? Give me a
Yes,
thumbs up if you do.
yes, I have.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, good. But go ahead and do write down this my phone number here. Uh, One of the ways that this class gets developed, and I make sure it covers what people are interested in, is your questions. And you can ask questions a number of ways. You can just speak up in class, hit unmute, and just interrupt me. That's perfectly fine. If you want, you can type in a chat box, and I'll read over the chat box before the end of the class and try to answer everyone's questions. But if you have a question between now and next Wednesday, when the next class is, something comes to you, send me a text at this phone number, 720-660-5791. Go ahead and write that down. All I ask is that you tell me who you are in the text so I know who I'm talking to. But I usually get back to you real quickly, usually the same day, with an answer. And if it's a hard question, I'll tell you what I'm doing and stay in touch until I get you the answer. If the question is something that I think a lawyer should help you with, I will tell you that. And I can even advise you, give you a name of a couple of lawyers that don't necessarily charge for the first question. So if you have a question, ask me and I will get back to you. It's very important. We have some good news from the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, the USCIS. Those are the people that handle citizenship applications. Starting in April 1st, they made the application form simpler. They shortened it down to 16 pages. They eliminated a lot of the questions that just really weren't important or didn't make sense anymore. Things that, like what you may have done during World War II. They got rid of that question. But the overall effect is it's good news. They've made things simpler. With the old form, if you needed to give them more information about any of your answers, you had to add a 8.5 by 11 sheet and write out on it the answer. Instead of that, with a new form, you just make a copy of part 14, and that tells you everything you need to fill in so that you can provide that information. That's a great change there. They've also made a change to the fees and the fee processes. They have made the fee for applying online actually cheaper. they have provided a process for applying for a reduction or a waiver and made that simpler too. And Norma Cordova just joined us, I see. Hi, Norma, how are you? Okay.
Buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes, Norma. Glad to see you.
Thank you so much. Good to see you.
All right. Norma, do you have a copy of the handbook and the application form? Good, excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, I was just explaining that if anybody has any questions, they need to write this number down and put it right in your handbook. Just write it on the cover and text me with any question you have, and I'll get back to you with an answer. What I was saying, though, when you joined us, is that the USCIS has actually made things a little easier for us, for the applicants. Excuse me. I'm getting over a cold. They've made the form shorter. They've actually incorporated, they've eliminated some of the questions that weren't really relevant, that didn't really make sense anymore. And they have made it simpler for how you answer, or if you need to provide them with additional information. And they've also included in the form a way of applying for a fee reduction or a fee waiver based on your income. I'm going to go into that at the end of this class and go into that in some detail. But for the most part, it's all really good news. I think it reflects a change in the attitude, an improvement with the USCIS, which is becoming more and more and more user-friendly for the applicants, which is good. That's the way it should be. So a couple of things that you have available to you are the resource material. The resource material is, first of all, the handbook. And the handbook you've got, the one that Andrea has provided to you, is version number 6. And that's effective, takes into account the changes that were made in April, just last month. So you've got the latest and greatest handbook. We have also available to you is the new N400 form, which I was just talking about. At the same time, the N400 form, you have the instructions for the N400. Andrea didn't send you that, but you can download those instructions. You can go to the uscis.gov/N400, and that address is in the introduction of your handbook. So if you look on the very first page of the handbook, you'll see that web page. But you can go there and download the instructions. I really recommend doing that and reading over them. A lot of good information. It goes into a lot of good detail. Those maybe answer questions you may already have. Of course, the website, which I was just talking about, has a lot of good information. One of the things about the website that I like is you can type in the search bar, you can type in your question, like change of address, and it'll take you right to where you need to go. It's really handy. But if you want to write it down, you can. Now, it's www.uscis.gov, and the .gov is important. It's not .com or .edu. It's .gov. That means it's an official U.S. government site. /N400. So that's the website. And again, if you didn't write it down now, it's in the introduction to your handbook. But those are your resource material excuse me, that you have now. And of course, I like to think these classes are a resource. We're going to have, well, you've already had 3 of the classes, so we actually have 6 more, counting this one tonight. We teach the classes 4 times a year. You can take them more than once, of course, if you want. And even if you don't take them, I'm available to answer questions at any time. If you take the class now, you go ahead and submit your application, and maybe 6 months, 9 months down the road, you have a question, send me a text, okay? I'll answer it no matter what. But those are your resources. What should you be doing?
Hi, excuse me.
Yes, I'm sorry, Darceline.
Sorry, just to let you know, I just received the book.
Oh, good. I'm glad. All right. Well,
Yeah.
very good. You're on top of it then. Andrea, are you still on the line? I don't know that she is. I'll make sure Andrea knows, but thank you for letting me know. All right. So what should you be doing now if you have not already sent in your application? If you have not already sent in your application, what should you be doing now? Well, read over the application form. The N400 form that Andrea sent to you is meant to be something you can write all over. Take notes, circle the questions that don't make sense or you need an answer to, or you want them explained, circle those. But start going through the N400 and filling in the information you do know. And make notes to yourself out to the side. Now, when you get ready to actually do your application, if you want to do it by mail and send in a hard copy, you can always download a new copy of the N400, a nice clean one from the website. But use the one you've got to take notes in. And I don't recommend you try to read the whole thing at once. Just read a couple of pages at a time. And again, if you don't understand what they're asking, or you don't understand why they're asking it, which is just as important, circle it and send me a text and I'll try to explain it. You should also fill out in the form what you can. Go ahead and just start filling it out. Use it like a worksheet. And also importantly, you should look at the questions that you might need to do a little research and look into it more for like dates and past addresses and that sort of thing. So that tells you what you should be looking for. And so you need to see what you can find out. And the best way to do that is just start reading the form. We're going to go over the form in greater detail in another class. But one of the questions in the form, for example, asks how many times you've left the country and the dates you left. So that might need you to do a little research and find out. But the sooner you know what you need to be working on and looking, the easier it's going to be for you. So circle the questions you don't understand and ask questions. Send me a text. Now, the other thing you can do is read over the handbook. And again, don't try to read the whole thing at once. Maybe just read one part at a time. There's like 14 parts you really need to read over. But read over those one at a time. Two of those parts are the civics questions and the English words you would need to know for the English reading and writing. But the other parts provide some really good information about how to fill out the form and what you can expect. So start doing that now. Even if you don't know when you're going to turn in your application, start doing that now. So what should you be doing now if you've already sent in your application? If you have already sent in your application, what should you be doing now? Well, hopefully you kept a copy of what you sent in, because you need to study that just as well as you study the civics questions and the English questions. And I'll explain that in a bit. But you need to read over that N400. If for some reason you did not fill it in or keep a copy for yourself, if you did it online, for example, or if you mailed it in, you didn't keep a copy, start filling in what you remember you answered, because it's really important that you know how you answered the questions during the interview. Start studying the civics questions. Now, there are 100 civics questions. There has been some confusion because in late 2019, the USCIS put out that there might be a new list of the civics questions. They ended up not using those at all. So we are still using the original 100 civics questions that were first published in 2008. Those are the civics questions that are in your handbook. The civics questions that are in part 9 of your handbook are the civics questions you should be studying. And again, don't try to study all 100 of them. Just maybe do 10 at a time. We're going to go over civics questions in class. Last week, we reviewed the second part of the civics questions. Tonight, we're going to go back and pick the first 12 questions back up, questions 1 through 12. So we're going to cover them in the class, but it's also important you start studying them on your own. In part 10 of the handbook are English words, a list of English words. There's one list for the reading questions, or the reading test, and there's one part for the writing test. You will be tested on how good your English is. And I'm going to talk about that in just a few minutes. But you're going to be tested on how good your English is. The good news is your English probably right now is good enough. If you have any doubts about that, send me a text and you and I can have a one-on-one meeting and I can help you understand if there's something you need to work on or that your English is fine. All right. So that's something we can do privately. Doesn't have to be done in class. But start studying those English words. The way to do that, and this is part 10 in the handbook, is go through and look at the words and only circle the ones that you might not be able to spell or might not be able to pronounce or might not be able to understand if you heard somebody say them, the ones you may not be familiar with. Because in order to succeed on the English test during the interview, you need to be able to understand the word. When you hear it, be able to write it out and spell it pretty correctly. You need to understand what it means. So that's why you need to study both lists. They will not use any other word in the English test except the words that are listed in part 10 of your handbook. Those are the only words they will use. Okay? So if you study those, you'll be able to do good on the reading and the writing. So when you submit your application, what happens after you submit your application? All right. If you submit your application online, the very first thing you do, what happens is that you set up what is called a case status account. And this is just like any other online account that you set up so you can use your computer with a username and a password. But that case status account lets you know a really good estimate on when your test and interview is going to be. They will keep updating that so that you won't be surprised when you get the letter inviting you to come into the interview. It also is how they would ask you for more information. And it's how you could ask them a question. Because it really is difficult, it's actually impossible, to call the USCIS on the phone and get the person who's dealing with your application. But by using the case status account, you can communicate directly with the people who are handling your application. So that's the first thing you do when you file your account online. But if you mail in your account on that, about 3 to 4 weeks, well, actually, let me go back. About 1 week after you send in your account, mail in your application, I'm sorry, you'll get a letter from them saying they received it. They got it. That's good. Now you know they've got it and you can feel a little better about things. But in that letter is something called a receipt number, RECEIPT, receipt number. And that receipt number is what you can use to go online and set up your case status account if you mail in your application. Let me repeat that. If you do your application online, it automatically, part of the steps, I think it's the first step, is you set up this case status account. But if you mail in your application, You'll get a letter back saying they got it. They give you a little number called a receipt number. You can go back online on that website, USCIS website, and use that receipt number to set up your case status account. And a case status account is important because that's how you communicate with the people who are handling your account, your application. About 3 to 4 weeks after you send in your application, you'll get a letter from the USCIS saying that whether they need or don't need to take a new picture and fingerprints so they can do a background check. They're using more and more right now the previous photograph and previous fingerprints that you already submitted when you got your green card. But if it's been a long time since you got your green card, they may want you to come in and do that again. But you'll get a letter telling you. And when you get that letter, it tells you exactly where to go and when to go. And you'll go in, and the only question they'll ask, well, they'll ask to see your green card, and they'll ask to see the letter that you received about your biometrics appointment. And then the only question they may ask is just to confirm, are you the person who filled out your application? And you'll say, yes, you are. Right now, the processing period, and that's the period of time between you send in your application and the period of time when you get your interview. That's the processing time. And for Denver, right now, that processing period is 5 to 8 months. However, I've already had 2 students who got called in 3 months, so it can be shorter. This is another real improvement that the USCIS has done for us, that they are shortening that time to process your order. Whether it's 3 months, 5 months, 8 months, or longer, that period of time allows you to prepare for your interview. So the wait is hard, I know, but it gives you a chance to prepare and do so you can do your best for the interview. About 4 to 5 weeks before your interview and test, you will receive the appointment letter for the interview. The appointment for the interview letter tells you exactly where to go. It may tell you some specific instructions for you that apply to your application, maybe things you need to bring. It'll tell you whether or not you need to wear a mask. It'll tell you whether or not people who drive you there can come into the building or not. It gives you a lot of good information. So read that letter carefully. And keep that letter. That letter is very important because you need to show that letter at your interview. All right, it's very important you bring that letter with you. So keep it in a very safe space when you get it. But about 4 to 5 weeks before your interview, you'll get this letter telling you when your appointment is. Now, when you get that letter, whenever it is, even if you're no longer taking this series of classes, I'm going to make an offer to you. I'm going to tell you when you get that letter, if you want, send me a text and tell me you got your interview letter and when it is, and whether you would like me to set up one or more one-on-one Zoom calls, just private ones, so we can go over anything before your interview that you may not be comfortable with, or you may have questions about, or something that's on your mind, or any concerns you have. My goal is when you go into that interview, you are totally prepared and you know what to expect. Okay? So whenever your interview is, this is my offer to you. Send me a text and I'll set up a Zoom call, just one-on-one, private, nobody else in the call. And we can talk about whatever it is you want to talk about to help you be prepared for the interview. Okay? All right. So keep talking about the interview. We are going to talk in another class in detail what to expect. But I want to kind of give you an overview right now. The interview will be conducted in English. Okay? During that interview, they will determine how good your English proficiency is. So how good does your English need to be? You can conduct the entire interview using simple present tense English and short, simple English words. All right? Your vocabulary can be pretty simple. And I know you're wondering, well, how simple does he mean? Give you an example. If you can understand what I'm saying in these classes, you'll do fine. If you can frame a question, if you can put a question together that you want to ask me, and you understand how I answer you, you'll do fine. Another example, if you can go into Walmart or Target and you walk up to somebody who's obviously an employee, they've got the right color shirt on or tunic, and they've got a badge with their name on it, and you can walk up to them and say, I want to buy a t-shirt for my child. Where are you, where do I go? Where would I find children's clothing? Or whatever. If you can make yourself understood that you want to buy something and the person then gives you directions on where to go, if you could follow those directions, find that department, find what you want, go up, pay for it, and walk out with what you wanted, your English is good enough. Any questions about that? Okay. Review part 8 in the handbook. That goes into some more detail about what you can expect. Part 8 in the handbook goes into quite a bit of detail, tells you how you can prepare. But the majority of the interview is going to be about your application, your specific application. They will be asking questions that you already answered in your application. Why are they doing that? Well, they may want additional information, or they may have a question to ask you. Or they may just want to make sure you're the person who filled out this application. Now, do you need to remember specific dates that you may have put on your application? You should be close, okay? Excuse me. By that, I mean, you have to give them the dates you went on every time you left the country in the past 5 years. You can say something like over Christmas 2 years ago. That might be a good enough answer. But you need to come close. If you don't remember a date, just tell them that. That's okay. During the interview, as I say, the interview will be in English. If the interviewer should ask you a question and you don't think you heard it right, or you didn't really understand what they say, you can say, can you say that again, please? Can you repeat that, please? That's perfectly all right. Now, if they repeat it and they still are using a word or a phrase you don't understand, it's okay to ask them, could you say that a different way, please? The important thing here, and you can use these phrases when you're talking to anybody in English, at a store or whatever. If somebody says something to you and they speak too fast, it's okay to say, I'm sorry, can you say that again, please, and slow down? That's okay. But it's important to communicate, and that's what the interviewer wants. The interviewer, the person at the USCIS, is not there to try to make you make a mistake. The opposite is true. They are there to help you become a citizen. It's their job to make you a citizen. It's not their job to keep you from being a citizen. Okay? The USCIS people are not the people who wear the uniforms when you cross the border. Different group entirely. These people, when you meet them, are going to be wearing regular clothes like you. They're going to take you back to their office, and have the interview in their office. And they're going to ask how you are. They might ask you how the weather is outside. They're going to hopefully make you smile, and hopefully you can make them smile. This interview is meant to be a friendly thing, okay? And that's why I tell people, go into the interview and smile. Make sure you make eye contact with them, because one of the things about understanding English, you may already know this, is it's easier to understand what somebody is saying if you can see their face. If you can see somebody's face and their hand gestures, It's easier to understand what they're saying in English. That's true. It helps you. So that's why you need to look them in the face, smile, they'll smile back, and relax. And all these things are covered in the handbook, but I'm going to go into them in greater detail. So the majority of the interview will be about your the majority of the interview will be about your N400 application. So you need to be studying that to prepare for the interview, and that's why you need to keep a copy of it when you send it in. The N400 now is shorter. It's only 16 pages, and it's asking questions about you. So you're the expert here. You've given them the answers. So they're going to ask you the same kind of questions. One of the things I think makes English a hard language, and it is, I know that, is it has a tremendous vocabulary of words. A huge list of English words are out there. And many of them, many of them mean the same thing. They're called synonyms. For example, the word dead, you could say deceased. You could say passed away. You could say a number of different ways, but they all mean the same thing. So it's possible when they ask you a question about your interview, your N400, they may use a different word to mean the same thing. The interview or the application specifically asks about your current residence. Well, they may ask you, where do you live now? That means the same thing. So as you're studying your own application, one of the things you can look at is not just how you answer the question, but think how else could they ask that same question? What other words could they use? Makes it kind of a game that way. The tests, though, that you're taking are your civics test. There are 100 civics questions. As I say, we're still using the 2008 original questions, and those are the questions that are in your handbook. But they're not going to ask you 100 questions. The most they will ask you is 10. Okay? And you only have to get 6 right. When you answer 6 right, they stop asking the civics questions. And that's how you know you did well. They don't necessarily tell you, oh, that's right or that's wrong. They just ask the question and you answer. That's the civics questions. In the morning of your interview, the person who's interviewing you gets a printout from the computer that has randomly picked 10 of the 100 questions. So the interviewer can't pick them. So he can't or she can't make them harder or simpler. The computer does that. So they're random, and that makes it fair. So those are the civics questions. In the handbook, in part 9, are all 100 civics questions. The 100 civics questions have the answers provided. Those are the answers that the USCIS interviewer expects to hear. Now, there is a possibility, if you're an expert in history, you may come up with a different answer that's not listed. And they'll probably work with you on that, but it's easiest and it makes the interview go faster is if you only give them one of the optional answers that are provided in part 9 of the handbook. I've listed the question and I've listed with dots the list of what acceptable answers they will take. Does that make sense? Okay. The English reading test, though, everything in the interview is oral. That means they're asking you out loud. Even the civics questions, they don't give you a sheet or anything, and you can read the question. You have to hear the question and answer the question out loud. Well, with the English reading, there's going to be a tablet on the desk, an electronic tablet that has a stylus on it. And a sentence will appear, and the interviewer will say, can you read the sentence, please? The English sentences will only use those words that I've listed in part 10 in the handbook. That's the only list they'll use. They won't use any other words. Okay? So if you know the list that is in the handbook, you're familiar with it for reading, you'll do quite well. But you need to be able to recognize it when you hear it. You need to be able to spell it because, if on the writing one especially, but you need to be able to read it when you see it written on the screen. Does that make sense? Okay. So a sentence will appear, and it's going to be a simple sentence, nothing complicated. The sentence may be something like, the president lives in the White House. The president lives in the White House. And you would read that, you'd read it out loud, and they say, very good. Well, you only have to get one sentence right. They're going to give you 3 chances, but you only need to get one right. And if you get the first sentence right, they stop asking the reading questions. The writing questions are a little different. The interviewer will say a sentence out loud to you. You have to hear it, and then you have to use that stylus and write it on the tablet. You can't erase on the tablet, but you can draw an X if you make a spelling mistake or you write the wrong word. Put an X through it and just keep writing. Okay? Does everything need to be spelled exactly right? No, but you have to spell it close enough that they can recognize the word. All right? There's a lot of short little words in there. To, in, of, that sort of thing. If you should happen to forget to write that word down, but the sentence contains the important words that they say out loud, you'll pass. And again, you only need to pass with one. You have to say one, you have to write one right, but you have 3 chances to do it. Almost everyone tells me that's the easiest part of the interview, the English reading and writing. Because if you can study those words that are in part 10, recognize them, spell them, write them, and you know what they mean, you'll do well. All right? So those are the 3 tests. The 4th test, which is kind of informal, it's determining how good your English proficiency is. How good does your English proficiency need to be? Your English proficiency is based on how well you can communicate. And again, you can use simple sentences to answer any question. I recommend keeping your answers short anyway. If you can answer a question they ask you with a yes or a no, that's great. But always speak loud enough that they can hear you as you're answering the questions. If they ask you a silly question that is maybe just something they're saying to make you feel comfortable, that's called small talk in English. Small talk. Things like, how are you? How's the weather when you came in? It was raining when I got to work. Is it still raining outside? Did you have trouble finding us? Have you been to the building before? Those are all things that they may ask to make you comfortable at the beginning of the interview. All right. But how you answer those, whatever they ask you, even if it's a simple little question like, how are you? Answer them. I'm fine. Or I'm nervous. That's perfectly natural too. I can't tell you exactly what the questions are going to be or what they'll say, but I can tell you there's a possibility of this one question, and it'll be at the very beginning of your interview. When you walk in, they will probably say, remain standing as they close the door. They walk around the desk and they'll say, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth? So help you God. You raise your hand, you say, I do. They'll say, you can sit down. Now, it's important that you understand that you have just taken an oath, O-A-T-H, oath. An oath is a promise to tell the truth. You have promised to tell the truth. That's what oath means. It's possible they might ask you, do you know what an oath is? And you can answer them, yes, an oath is a promise. And I just promised to tell the truth. They then know that you understand that everything you say from then on has to be the truth. One question you can, or one, if you don't know the answer to a question, they might ask you. And you really don't know it, it's perfectly all right to answer, I don't know. I don't remember. If it's about your interview. That's okay too, all right? So be comfortable going into this interview, knowing that you can answer in simple English, straightforward English. Also, I would imagine that your English right now is probably good enough. A bad thing you can do is to not answer a question and just stand there and smile at them. That's possibly a reaction you might have if you're nervous. They might say, is it raining out? And you could just sit there and smile. Well, that would make them think maybe you don't understand the question and maybe your English isn't good enough. So listen to what they're saying to you and answer it in a way that they would expect you to answer it. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. I'm going to talk a little bit about the civics questions. We're going to go over those again. But if you have your handbook and you want to open it up at the beginning of part 9, part 9, the civics questions. I want to go over the paragraph at the very beginning. And this more or less is a repeat of what I just said. But to hit 100 civics questions, and the word civics, by the way, refers to the history, the culture, the geography, and how our government works of our country. That all of those things are part of civics. It goes back to a Greek word that refers to somebody who lives in a town or a country or a village. There's, but that's the word civics refers to what you need to know if you're going to be a citizen. So the questions, the 100 questions that they will ask, and they won't ask any others besides these, are listed in part 9. The format of that is the question is after a number, and then there is one or more than one correct answer that they will accept. Unless they tell you they want two answers or 3 answers, they are only expecting to hear one. Speak loudly, speak clearly, and if you've been studying, you should be able to do this well. Depending on when you go in for your interview, for example, we have a federal election in November of this year, in the fall. And that federal election will determine who the president is, who the Speaker of the House is, senators, representatives. It's a very important election. So some of the answers that are included in Part 9 are what's true right now. But after the election, they may change. So be aware of that. Now, I will try to keep you appraised, and after the election, I will send you an update on answers to those so you can make a change in your handbook. Excuse me. If you are 65 years of age or older, and you've been a legal permanent resident of the United States for 20 years, you may only need to study 20 of the questions, not 100. And those are marked with a little star or an asterisk in part 9. Okay? So that's the format. They will ask you a question out loud and you answer the question out loud. All right? Okay, I am going to share my book, share my screen again. And I want to talk a little bit about specifically questions 1 through 12. And 1 through 12 are called part 1, the American government. This is important information, and it's important that you understand it and kind of put it into a logical order. But we were 13 separate colonies to Great Britain before we became a country. 13 separate colonies. We weren't united at that point in time when we had the Revolutionary War. We were 13 separate colonies, just like 13 separate governments, actually. In fact, back then, people didn't really travel much between those colonies. They might as well have been on another continent. There weren't highways, there weren't railroads, there certainly weren't airplanes to fly. But the only way to communicate was on foot because there weren't roads really for wagons. So there were 13 separate colonies. The colonies all reported back to London to the king, King George III. And the king was not treating the 13 colonies very well. There were a number of problems. Things like high taxes. Liberty was limited. They couldn't really travel or trade. And they didn't get anything for those taxes. There was no benefit. The British government at that point in time, the king didn't give anything back to build those roads I was telling you about that didn't exist. Well, starting in 1773, it got really heated in 1774. They started having riots. They started having armed conflicts. Gunfire was fired, and a war broke out, a war for independence for the 13 colonies. And at this point in time, they were starting to think of themselves as 13 united colonies because they were fighting one enemy. On July 4th, 1776, a man named Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence and published it. Now, the word declaration means you say something out loud, publicly, so everyone can hear. And the word independence means freedom. The purpose of this document, it was a one-page document. It could be passed out throughout the 13 colonies and even sent to some foreign governments so that everyone understood why these 13 colonies were fighting the British for freedom. Thomas Jefferson just came right out and says, we're already free. We don't recognize the fact that you're our king. And he listed why, the reasons that he didn't like. But Thomas Jefferson, again, Thomas Jefferson, in July 4th, 1776, he proclaimed that the rights of men, all men, no matter where they are in the world, are basic of life. You can't just chop off somebody's head for no reason. Liberty, the ability to move around freely, and the pursuit of happiness. And that really means to do whatever you want to do to make your life better. Up until that time, back in the 1700s, if your father was a farmer, about the most you could ever expect to hope to be is a farmer or a farmer's wife. If your father was a wealthy landlord and had a lot of land and multiple farms, your life was going to be a little bit better. But there wasn't much upward mobility. But Thomas Jefferson, everyone has that right to move upward in life and to improve themselves. The Declaration of Independence announced that we were independent from Great Britain and that we are free. That's the important thing to remember. It's also important to remember that before we could do anything, win the war, have our own constitution, set up our own government, we had to declare ourselves independent, free. The next important document to remember is something called the Constitution. Now, the Constitution of the United States is a small document. See this little pamphlet here, this little book, skinny little book? This is the entire Constitution of the United States. It was written over 250 years ago, and they've only had to add to it or change it 27 times. And those were minor changes, as you can see. This book, this Constitution it's the supreme law of the land. It's the basis of all laws. It identifies our rights, our responsibilities. It sets up the government. It defines how the government is going to be. It talks about the roles of the states, which were the 13 colonies became states, and it talks about the roles of the federal government. Federal government being the overall government, like in Washington, D.C. We won the war for independence in 1783. we elected George Washington as our first president. And one of the things he did was he called representatives from all of the states, the new states, to come together to write what laws we were going to live under. And in the summer of 1787, he called everyone together into Philadelphia, and he presided as the president of the Constitutional Congress. And it defined that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. The first three words of the Constitution, the very beginning of this, is "We the people." I don't know if you can read that. "We the people. We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union." He explains why he is together. But the radical thing at that point in time was this was not a book of laws handed down to the people by the leader. It were the laws that the people themselves handed up to the leaders to say, this is how we are going to be governed. The Constitution sets up the government and defines the government, and it protects the basic rights of everyone living here, whether they're citizens or not. So even though you're currently not a citizen, your rights are protected by this Constitution. They have had to make changes to the Constitution 27 times. Now, a change or an addition to the Constitution is called an amendment. An amendment. So they've only had to make 27 of these, and they're pretty straightforward and simple. It didn't make the document that much bigger. It clarified things. It actually gave more rights every time. The majority of the amendments actually gave more rights to people. Excuse me. The first 10 amendments are called the Bill of Rights. All right. Now, the Bill of Rights, the word bill is not somebody's name, like Bill Johnson. The word bill means a list. In the 18th century English, that's what you would call a list. We still use that word, like if we go to a restaurant and we ask, can we have our bill, please? The bill means it's the list of everything you ate, you ordered. You get your bill when you eat at a restaurant. Well, the Bill of Rights is the list of the rights of Americans. The first 10 amendments out of the 27 define those rights. Most of them are actually defined in the very First Amendment. The First Amendment states that everyone in America, whether you're a citizen or not, has the following rights or freedoms. Speech. You can say what you want to say. Freedom of speech is very important. Freedom of the press. Now, the press back then meant literally like a press that would make newspapers or books. It would press the ink onto the pages. But the press now refers to TV, radio, the internet, social media. Those are freedoms. The government cannot control what's said in those forums, as well as newspapers, magazines, and books. The third is freedom of religion. Now, freedom of religion means you can practice any religion you want or no religion. This again was very radical back then because all governments had a formal state sanctioned religion. England had the Church of England. France had the Catholic Church, for example. Germany had Lutheranism. But they all had state religions. The United States said, we're not having a state religion. There's a separation of religion from government. And you have the right not to practice any religion if you want. And that was pretty radical back then, too. You can petition the government. Now, to petition the government means you can ask the government for things. You have that right. For example, if your child walks to school every day and has to cross a busy street and there's not a traffic light there to stop traffic, you have the right to go to the city government and appear before the officials there and say, I live on this street and children are crossing this busy street and there's no street light. We need to put a street light in there. It's a reasonable thing to request and you have the right to ask for it. And the last one in the First Amendment is freedom of assembly. That means you have the right to meet. I didn't have to get permission to call this meeting for these classes. If just two of you want to get together, that's fine. If 102 of you want to get together, that's fine. You have that right to meet. This next part, which is in the Constitution, is, I think, one of the most important things in the Constitution. It's called the rule of law. The rule of law says everyone has to follow the same law. No one is above the law. The president, the Congress, the courts are not above, they all have to abide by the same laws we have to abide by. Everyone no one is above the law. The rule of law applies to everyone. The last thing I want to mention, because it's covered in the first 12 questions, is the current economic system for the United States is capitalism, or the market economy. The ability to invest or make goods to sell to make money. That's a right. And it also includes the right of private property. That's important too. Okay? Before the end of the class, I will save this document and put it in the chat box. And if you want to go to the chat box, then you can click on it and it'll download it to your device. All right? Any questions about those things? Okay. Thank you, Darceline. I appreciate it. Let's talk a little bit about the actual questions 1 through 12. I got a thumbs up from Raisley. Thanks. I'm going to share my screen again, and I'm going to actually pull up the part 9 from the handbook. All right, and part 9, I have to find it here. Okay, here we go. I have too many things on my book, on my inbox. I'm sorry, my homepage. So I'm going to try to make this a little bit bigger so everyone can see it. This is in part 9 of the handbook. If you have part 9, if you have the handbook, go ahead and open it to part 9. We go over it. I'm not asking you to answer this. I'm going to state what the question is, and I'm going to explain why the answers are what they are. All right. So the very first question is, what is the supreme law of the land? It's the Constitution. There's only one answer for that. The supreme law of the land is the Constitution. What does the Constitution do? What does the Constitution do? Well, it sets up the government, or you could say it defines the government, or you could say it protects the basic rights of Americans. Any of those three are right, and you only have to answer with one of them. Does anybody have a question about why these three answers are what the Constitution does? It defines how the government is going to be set up. It sets up the government, defines it, and we're going to go into that in greater detail in another class. But it also protects the rights of Americans because of the First Amendment. The idea of self-government is in the first 3 words of the Constitution. What are these words? Okay, the phrase self-government means we govern ourselves. We elect officials to be our leaders. We don't have a leader who's telling us what to do. We are telling them how to do it. Okay, it's self-government. But the idea of self-government is in the first 3 words of the Constitution. And those first 3 words are we the people. So, number 4, what is an amendment? Well, an amendment, you can answer either it's a change to the Constitution or it's an addition to the Constitution. Both are right. You only have to answer with one. What do we call the first 10 amendments to the Constitution? The Bill of Rights. Again, the first 10 amendments identify the rights of the citizens and the people who live in America. The right of speech, well, we'll go over it in the next question, but those are called the Bill of Rights. And again, bill is not a person's name, it's a list. And now let's tell about what those rights are. What is one right or freedom from the First Amendment? You could answer speech. You can say what you want. You can answer religion. You can have any religion you want or no religion. You can answer assembly. You have the right to meet. You can answer press. Again, that includes not just books and internet, but it also includes magazines, uh, uh, social media, TV, radio, that sort of thing. And you have the right to petition the government. You have the right to ask the government for something if you need it. So those are the rights. You can, and again, the question says, what is one right? So you only have to give one of those. How many amendments does the Constitution have? 27. All right, next one. What did the Declaration of Independence do? And again, the word declaration, to say out loud, independence, freedom. The Declaration of Independence announced our independence from Great Britain, or it declared our independence from Great Britain, or it said that the United States is free. You only have to say one of those. What are two rights of the Declaration of Independence? Thomas Jefferson based the whole premise that he had the right to declare we are free, that every man has the right of life, liberty, and the right to pursue happiness. Well, you only have to list answer with two of those three. So you can answer with any two you want. What is freedom of religion? Freedom of religion means you can practice any religion or not practice a religion. What is the economic system of the United States? It's a capitalist economy, or you could say it's a market economy. They mean the same thing. And the last one we're going to talk about tonight is what I think is one of the most important parts of the Constitution. What is the rule of law? And there's four different answers you could give them, but they all say the same thing. No one is above the law. Everyone must follow the same law. Our leaders must obey the law, and the government must obey the law. So that's questions 1 through 12. We talked about the next batch last week, I think, but that's covered in class number 4. All right. Okay. I'm going to stop that and ask if anybody has any questions about the civics questions. Any questions at all? All right. As you go through and you're reading these on your own, if one of them doesn't make sense, you don't quite understand the words, it's using a phrase you're not comfortable with, and there are a few questions that have phrases like Emancipation Proclamation that you may have trouble with, just send me a text and I'll answer you, okay? All right, the last thing I wanted to talk about tonight is the fees. But again, the fees have been changed, effective April 1st. All right, I'm going to move this over here a little bit. I'm going to try to make it a little bit bigger. So there was a new fee. The fee is what you have to pay when you submit your application. So effective April 1st, 2024, if you mail in your application, it's $760. $760. But if you apply online, it's $50 less, $710. Why is that? Well, if you mail in your application, the USCIS has to take the application, they send it to a contractor who scans every single page and makes a digital file of your application and gives it back to the USCIS. Well, if you do it online, that's automatic. It's part of the process. So they don't have to pay to have that done. So they only charge $710. They're also quite frankly, trying to encourage more and more people to do it online. If you do it online, another advantage is they can start working on it sooner. You don't have to wait for the time it takes the mail to get there. Now, it is possible that you can request a reduced fee. You can cut that $760 into $380 if your documented annual household income, that's the income that your household, that's you and your spouse or any working children, that you combined all your income together to pay taxes on. If that documented annual household income, and that means what did you make last year, the previous year? Or if you're turning this in after April 15th, what are you declaring for last year? Okay, so your documented annual income, if it is greater than 150% and not more than 400% of the federal poverty guidelines. The federal poverty guidelines are something that the US government publishes every year that determines when somebody has reached a level where they need financial help, welfare, food stamps, that sort of thing. And that financial guideline is based on how much you make, based on your family size. For example, 150% of the federal poverty guidelines for a family of four is $46,800. So if your household income for a family of four is between $46,800 and $124,000, you can have your fee cut in half. That's pretty good. You don't have to pay as much. That's an improvement. It just started April 1st. This higher end of it. That's going to make a lot of people now be able to pay less. But what if your household income is under 150%? If it's under $46,000, if your family of four makes under 46,000, or if you're filing by yourself, if you made under $22,590, you can actually not pay anything. That's pretty cool too. One of the things they've done with the new application form, the new N400, is you can go ahead and apply for that right on the form. You can tell them you're applying right on the form. And that way, when you send in the application, you can you know what you have to pay. You don't have to wait for permission for them to grant you that fee waiver, fee reduction. So that's good news. Now, when you're getting ready to apply, if you have a question about how this works and if this applies to you, send me a text and I'll make a private one-on-one Zoom call with you and your spouse if you want, and I'll go over it with you and explain it in detail if you need it. But if you want, you can just go on the USCIS website and they've got you could go up to the search engine and you could put down fee reduction or fee waiver calculator, and it'll take you right there and it'll calculate for you. If your federal household income falls below these numbers right here, if your household income, for example, is below 46,800 for a family of four, you need to also include another form with your application, and that's an I-912 when applying. Now, right now, and I think this may change, but right now, if you are asking for a fee reduction or a fee waiver, you have to mail in your application. You can't do it online. I'll say that again. If you want to apply because of your household income for a fee reduction or even a fee waiver, you have to mail in your application. You don't have the option to do it online. Okay? A lot of information I threw at you tonight. Any questions? Okay. Well, guys, thank you very much for joining me tonight. But also, and this is important, this is something I feel very strongly about. Thank you for what you're doing. thank you, because I know how hard this is for you. I know how expensive it is. I know it's kind of stressful. Uh, but it's worth it. And I appreciate you going through this and becoming a citizen. Because when you're a citizen and you're part of our country, or you're part of our country now, but when you're a citizen of the United States, you are making the United States a better place by you being here and being part of it. This is a country of immigrants. All right. Every person who's in the United States who's a citizen right now has an immigrant somewhere in their background. They're in my case, my grandfather came over from Italy. Uh, uh, but he was a great grandfather or great grandfather or grandmother. Or if you're an American Indian, a Native American Indian, those people have ancestors who immigrated across the Bering Strait 25,000 years ago, but they all had to come here, just like you came here. Everyone has, we are a country of immigrants, and that's what's made us great. But thank you for what you're doing, and I appreciate that. And thank you for joining me tonight, and please join me next Wednesday, and I'll throw some more information at you. But again, if you have a question between now and then, you know what to do. Send me a text. All right? So right now, hang in there for a second, and I'm going to put that study guide in the chat box so you can download it, and I'll make sure you know what to do. So the study guide right here, I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to go over to the chat box, and I'm going to drop it right here. Okay, so if you go to the chat box right now, and how you do that is go down to the bottom of your screen if you're on a computer or an iPad. If you're on an iPhone, it's up. There's three little dots in the upper corner. If you click on one of those and look for chat box, ChatBox, you click on that, you'll see there is a file called Study Guide Part A. And all you have to do is click on that to download it. It'll download it to your device. All right. So I'm going to wait a little bit to give you a chance to do that. But once you do that, you're free to go. And I will see you next week. Good night.
Okay,
Good night.
thank you for your help.
Thank you for attention.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, everyone downloaded? All right. Good night, people.